Ram Gandharim Dronam Evacha Tulya Dukkau Cha Sangamya Ha Kashtam Iti Hochatu Bhishmam Kripam Saviduram Gandharim Dronam Evacha Tulya Dukkau Cha Sangamya Ha Kashtam Iti Hochatu Bhishmam Kripam Saviduram Gandharim Dronam Evacha Tulya Dukkau Cha Sangamya Ha Kashtam Iti Hochatu Bhishmam Kripam Saviduram Gandharim Dronam Evacha Bhishmam Bhishma Kripam Acharya Kripa Saviduram and also Vidura Gandharim Gandhari, the wife of Dhritarashtra, Dronam Acharya Drona, Evacha, as well as Tulya, equally, Dukkau, sorrowful, Cha, and Sangamya, meeting with, Ha, alas, Kashtam, how painful, Iti, thus, Ha Uchatu, they spoke. Translation: the two lords met with Bhishma, Kripa, Vidura, Gandhari, and Drona. Showing sorrow equal to theirs, they cried out, Alas! How painful this is! Purport: Srila Sridhar Swami points out that those who were involved in the assassination attempt were, of course, not at all sorry to hear of the Pandava's death. The persons specifically mentioned here, however, Bhishma, Kripa, Vidura, Gandhari, and Drona, were actually unhappy to hear of the supposed tragedy. So the chapter is Satrajit murdered, the jewel returned. Chapter 57. The Srimad Bhagavatam is sharing the same history as Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, the details that aren't presented here are presented. And quick summary of the details, then I'd like to read the details. The Pandavas, Pandu was the second son. Dhritarashtra was the first son, Pandu was the second son, Vidura was the third son. And their birth was determining the succession of kings in that Kuru dynasty. So Kuru dynasty means going back one elevated king named Kuru. So they're all Kauravas. The distinction between Kauravas and Pandavas, it is said, came about by Dhritarashtra making a distinction. They're all Kauravas. They're all sons of Kuru. They're in the same dynasty. But to separate them out, which was his plan, they're the Pandavas. The sons of Pandu, particularly Yudhishthir, the firstborn of the next generation, he was to become the king. Pandu died early, so when the boys were still very young, and the advice of Vyasadeva was that they should return. When they returned, many people were happy. Oh, they're sad that they heard that Pandu had died, but they're happy to have these young 5 powerful boys in their company again, and their mother, Kunti, in their company again. But very quickly, intrigue began, very quickly, because the Pandavas were very strong. And the sons of Dhritarashtra were also strong, but strongest amongst them was Bhima. And Bhima, in a playful mood, would play with other boys as boys will play. And he would pick up a boy and toss the boy in the air. This was too much for Duryodhana. So several things happened, but one of those things that happened was an intrigue plotted by Duryodhana and Purochana to kill the entire family, Kunti and the 5 boys. And the plan was presented to Dhritarashtra, who didn't approve the plan. And, Mahabharata dialogue. In very cunning ways, Duryodhana basically told his father, look the other way. You don't approve. Because they're his brother's sons. Although Dhritarashtra did want his sons to become the king, to kill his brother's sons, so he wasn't inclined. Duryodhana spoke in such a way that just looked the other way. So this plan was made to build a house of lac. And the plan of the house of lac it was a summer home, and there was a big festival coming after some time. And the idea was the family could enjoy royal life in this nice summer home by a river and participate in the festival. So Yudhishthir, on the one hand, understood intuitively that there's some intrigue going on, but he didn't intervene. So the plan, I'm going to go back to here. The young princes were attracted when Dhritarashtra saw that their curiosity had been aroused and said, I have been hearing a lot about Varanavata of late. It occurred to me that you boys would derive much pleasure from visiting that city. Why not make a state visit? Bestow charity on the people and take your leisure. After enjoying yourselves there, you may return here whenever you please. Yudhishthir, however, was very intelligent. He understood that this was simply a ploy to remove them from the city. Why did the king not ask his own sons to go to Varanavata? Yudhisthira had seen the unusual kindness that Duryodhana had been displaying toward the people lately, and he knew that he was hatching a plot. But he felt helpless. He decided it would be better to do as the king suggested for the time being. Their position was not strong. The Pandavas had few friends or supporters, and the king's sons were constantly inclined to harm them in any way they could. Perhaps a time away from Hastinapur would help. A date was set for the Pandavas' departure. Duryodhana was overjoyed that the Pandavas had agreed to go, and immediately what happened? And immediately began to make plans. He summoned his confidential counselor Purochana. Taking him by the hand, the prince said, "This world and all its wealth is as much yours as mine. You should act so it will be well protected. You are my most trustworthy supporter. I'm completely dependent on you. Listen as I tell you what must be done, and done secretly." But the secret got out of the bag. "Do not repeat to anyone what I shall now say to you." Duryodhana asked Purochana to go at once to Varanavata. Using skilled and trusted artisans, he should construct a spacious mansion for the Pandavas. It should be elegant and full of all furnishings, but it should be made entirely of flammable materials. Mix ghee and oil with earth and a huge quantity of lac. Plaster the walls with it and then paint over it carefully. Then scent the house so that no one will suspect anything. The prince also instructed Purochana to leave pots of ghee and oil in the house. He wanted to ensure that the building would burn to ashes within minutes. Duryodhana then revealed to Purochana the whole plan he had made with Shakuni. Purochana should meet the Pandavas as soon as they arrived in Varanavata. He should then show them their quarters. He should make sure that the house had been built for them on the king's orders. Purochana should live with them to help allay their suspicions. Then, when they were least suspecting it, Purochana should set fire to the house while they were asleep. Duryodhana squeezed his minister's hand. "Everything depends on you, Purochana. Know that I shall reward you with unlimited wealth. If you do me this favor, leave immediately, for the Pandavas will be there soon." Purochana promised to do everything that had been asked. Gathering a number of his men, he left immediately for Varanavata on a swift chariot drawn by asses. They began work on the house the moment they arrived. On their day of their departure, the Pandavas went before the elders and bowed down in respect. They touched Bhishma and Dhritarashtra's feet and embraced their equals with love. Taking leave of the ladies, they walked respectfully around them with folded palms. Then they mounted their fine golden chariots. The citizens crowded around them as they made preparations to leave. then followed the chariots as they slowly made their way out of the city. The young princes felt sorrow at leaving their homes and loved ones. Seeing their grief, some of the people spoke out. One Brahmana said, King Dhritarashtra does not have equal vision. He favors his sons over these victorious, virtuous princes. Pandu's sons will never commit any sin. They are blameless and pure and do not deserve to be sent away. Some of the people censured Bhishma for allowing it to happen, while others condemned the blind king and his son. Many of them declared that they would go with the Pandavas to Varanavata rather than remain with the cruel-minded monarch. But Yudhisthira checked them. The king is our father, our preceptor, and and our superior. He is always worthy of our worship and should be obeyed without question. This is the eternal injunction of Scripture, and we should abide by it with a peaceful mind. Unquote. When the time came, he said, they would render his brothers and him service in another way. The citizens then circumambulated the chariots and departed, tears flooding their eyes. When the Pandavas reached the edge of the city, Vidura met them. Vidura had learned of Duryodhana's scheme through his palace spies. He wanted to warn Yudhisthira without anyone else understanding his message, going before the prince, who was still in the people's midst. He spoke to him in the language of the Malecha tribes people. Speaking cryptically, Vidura said, quote, one who knows there are sharp weapons capable of cutting the body, although not made of metal, is not injured by them. He survives who understands that the consumer of wood and straw does not reach the dwellers of a hole in the forest. Always stay alert. One who keeps his senses under control can never be overcome by an enemy. Vidura spoke for some minutes, and Yudhisthira, who was well versed in many languages, understood his meaning, although the message was not understandable by others. When Vidura finished, Yudhisthira replied, I understand. Vidura smiled, then walked respectfully around the princes. Bidding them farewell, he left for his own house. On the road to Varanavata, Kunti asked Yudhisthira what Vidura had said. Yudhisthira replied that Vidura had told him that the house in Varanavata would be burned down. He had also told the prince that the means of escape would be revealed to him. Quote, the learned Vidura then said that he who is self-controlled wins the sovereignty of the earth. When the citizens of Varanavata heard that the famous Pandava brothers were approaching their city, they came out in the thousands to greet the princes. The people saw Yudhisthira leading his brothers like Indra leading the celestials. They worshipped and welcomed the princes and led them into their city to the accompaniment of trumpets, drums, and conch shells. Cheers filled the air As the brothers proceeded slowly along the road, reaching the city's main concourse, they got down from their chariots and went first to meet the Brahmins. Then they met with the city officials, then the warriors, the tradespeople, and finally the workers and servant classes. After the greetings were over, the Pandavas were received as guests of one of the city's chief officials. Remembering Vidura's warning and unsure of what to expect, they remained there for 10 days. Then Purochana told them that their own residence was ready. He personally led the princes and Kunti to the house he had named the blessed dwelling. As they entered the house, Yudhishthira said quietly to Bhima, "From the odors I detect here, it is evident that the house has been made of lac and other materials soaked in ghee and oil. Without doubt, Purochana intends to burn us to death in this place. It is just as Vidura told me. Duryodhana has obviously entrusted Purochana with the job of killing us." I mean, he's like figured the whole thing out. Bhima replied, "Then why should we live in dwelling this death trap? Let us return to where we have already been staying." Yudhishthira did not think Bhima's idea to be wise. If we let Purochana realize that we suspect him, then he may try anything in order to kill us. Obviously, he is without scruples and is determined to do the will of the ruthless Duryodhana. We should not give him any indication that we are aware of his wicked intentions. When Purochana left, the brothers spoke openly together. Yudhishthira said that they should dig a tunnel under the house in order to escape. Oh boy. It just jumped a number of pages. Just jumped. Really bad. Okay. Okay. They should escape without anyone knowing. Duryodhana would think them dead and would not then pursue them. His brothers agreed. Then they searched the house, for a place to dig the tunnel. As they were looking, a man came to the house and introduced himself as a friend of Vidura. He told Yudhishthira that he was a skilled miner and had been sent there by Vidura, who had informed him that on a new moon night, Purochana planned to set light to the door of their house. Yudhishthira looked at the man carefully. Was this yet another of Duryodhana's deceits? The miner reassured him by mentioning the incident when Vidura had spoken to him in the Malecha dialect. Yudhishthira then welcomed him warmly and replied, "We are ever protected by the virtuous Vidura. It is our good fortune that you have come here. The wicked and sinful Duryodhana has had this house constructed from all sorts of flammable materials. He in command of wealth and allies, he pursues us relentlessly." The miner said he would begin construction of a subterranean passage immediately. He began to dig from the center of the house and covered the hole with planks and a large rug. As the miner worked, the Pandavas spent their days wandering in the surrounding woods. They soon ascertained a route leading away from Varanavata through the forest. When living in the house, the brothers gave to Parochana the appearance of being peaceful and happy so as to not arouse his suspicions. But at night they slept with their arms at the ready, one of them always remaining alert in case Parochana made an unexpected move. No one but the miner knew their plans. A full year passed in this way. Parochana was satisfied, thinking the Pandavas were unaware of his intentions. When Yudhisthira saw that the minister suspected nothing and trusted them completely, he said to his brothers, "Let us preempt Parochana before he can enact his plan. I think we should ourselves set light to the house and make our escape." The tunnel was complete. Yudhisthira considered that their best hope lay in deceiving Duryodhana into thinking his plan had succeeded. They would allow the brothers that would allow the brothers to escape without being pursued. They would then have time to consider their next move. After discussing all the angles, the brothers decided that they would set fire to the house the next night. The following day, a festival was being celebrated at Varanavata. Kunti distributed food and wealth to the Brahmins, and many poor people came to the Pandavas' mansion to beg charity. By the arrangement of Providence, this is important, a Nishada tribeswoman also arrived there with her 5 sons. So when the thing burned down, they found the bones of the Nishada woman and 5 sons. They thought, oh, Pandavas are dead. And that's Kunti. After distributing the food, they sat the woman and her sons down, then brought them food and a large quantity of wine. Gradually they became drunk and fell asleep where they had been eating. The servants, unable to rouse them, decided to leave them there for the night, although the Pandavas were unaware of this. So they didn't burn the house thinking they would be killed. They're unaware. They just had given courtesy and generosity and fed them. Outside, as night fell, a storm blew up. The Pandavas sat together in their room, waiting until they were sure that Parochana, who occupied the room by the door of the house, was asleep. Yudhisthira then instructed Bhima to set fire to the house. Bhima then took a torch and lit the door and several other places as his brothers and Kunti made their way along the tunnel. He followed them quickly, and in moments the whole house was ablaze. That doesn't say what happened to Parochana. Hearing the roar of the fire, the citizens of Varanavata all came out and saw with horror the blazing mansion. They were aware of a rivalry between Duryodhana and the Pandavas, and they immediately guessed what had happened. "This is undoubtedly Duryodhana's doing," they said. he has employed his evil minister to destroy the innocent and unsuspecting sons of Pandu. Fie upon that wicked man whose understanding is so crooked. The bewailing people of the city surrounded the burning mansion and remained there throughout the night. When morning came, they threw water onto the embers and searched the burnt out ruins. They found the remains of Parochana and also the Nishada woman and her sons. Concluding that the Pandavas were dead, they lamented loudly, censuring Duryodhana and his father. Some of them even condemned Bhishma, Drona, and the other Kuru elders for allowing such a terrible thing to happen. The miner, who was present among the citizens, ensured that the searchers did not find the tunnel. Thus, no one in Varanavata even guessed that the Pandavas were alive and that they were at that time making their way through the forest. The city leaders then sent messengers to Hastinapur with the news of the Pandavas' death. When Dhritarashtra heard the messages from Varanavata, he cried out in grief, "Alas, my brother Pandu has died again today because his heroic sons and their illustrious mother have been killed. What a cruel destiny! How can I face life without my gentle nephews?" Dhritarashtra then ordered that the royal brahmanas go immediately to Varanavata to perform the funeral rites for Kunti and her sons. Along with Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, and other elders, the king went to the Ganges to offer sacred water to the departed souls. As they stood in the river, they cried out, "Oh, Yudhisthira," mentioned their names. Others called out the names of Kunti and the twins. Thousands of grieving citizens came out of Hastinapur to offer oblations. Sounds of wailing and sorrow filled the air. Bhishma was particularly afflicted as he remembered the young princes who had always been like sons to him. Only Vidura did not lament, as he knew the truth. But still, he did not speak about it to anyone. He knew he could not risk telling even Bhishma, who was always loyal to the king and Hastinapur. So there's more. They were greeted on the other side of the tunnel by boatmen. Boatmen took them across the river, and then they meet Hidimba and so forth. So back to the Bhagavatam. So this chapter begins with Krishna and Balaram. They're in Dwarka. They receive the news that the Pandavas have been killed in a fire. Although they're omniscient lords, they knew that wasn't the case. They they didn't want to tell everybody the real story, so they went along with the fiction story, and they came and were participating with others in grieving the loss of these wonderful personalities, the Pandavas and Kunti. And so the persons that knew this wasn't so, interesting, includes Vidura. But in the verse for this morning, of the persons mentioned, Vidura's name is also mentioned. The two lords met with Bhishma, Kripa, Vidura, Gandhari, and Drona. Showing sorrow equal to theirs, they cried out, "Alas, how painful this is." Now, in the BBT purport, it says Vidura also were actually unhappy, but Vidura was not unhappy. Vidura knew, but he displayed as if he was unhappy because that was the plan. He didn't want anyone to know that they had survived. That was, what the next move was had to be determined, and the next move is what we hear. By the way, yesterday we spoke about Lord Nityananda, and one of the places that Lord Nityananda in Ekachakra, before he was born in Ekachakra, that's a place where the Pandavas went. Many of you know this. You know this? When the Pandavas were like hiding out, they met with Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva understood everything, of course, and he said, "Wait till the coast is clear. For now, go to Ekachakra." So Kunti and the Pandavas went to Ekachakra. And they were, when they went to Ekachakra, many things happened. One of the things was a big demon was killed. We didn't get that far in yesterday's presentation because of time. But a Rakshasa demon was killed by Bhima at Ekachakra. And then after some time, they left Ekachakra and they were traveling along the road, and they heard from the Brahmanas who were traveling along the road that this Swayamvar of Draupadi was about to take place. So they're in the disguise of Brahmanas, and so they went to the Swayamvar of Draupadi in the disguise of Brahmanas. And that's where Arjun won the hand of Draupadi. But nobody knew it was Arjun because they thought they were dead. But in the disguise of Brahmanas, he was allowed to participate in the Swayamvar event. So this all happened before they came out as who they really were. They came out who they really were when Arjuna, who had won the hand of Draupadi, then all the other princes and kings were, they did what princes and kings do. They challenged the young Brahmana. So Arjun showed himself in full colors, and Bhima with his club, and they smashed everybody. And then they married Draupadi. And then it became public. They weren't dead. There was a big public ceremony of the wedding of Draupadi. So the secret escape was now no longer a secret, but it stayed secret for some time, purposefully, under Vyasa's advice. Keep it secret for some time. So all this is like Krishna's Leela. Very intriguing. Better than a mystery story or something. And the main thing is attention is continually being drawn to Krishna and Krishna's devotees. Because as we know from the Bhagavatam, discussing topics about Krishna's devotees is the same as discussing topics about Krishna because of their intimate connection with Krishna. So there we are, chapter 57, text number 2. Krishna had come all the way from Dwaraka, and while Krishna was away from Dwaraka, some other intrigue happened. And we'll hear about the other intrigue coming up. Discussion? There we go.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Um, you explained that this is Krishna Lila, so Krishna is orchestrating all this wonderful narration and history. Um, However, the use of by great personalities, specifically here we see Vidura is very expert at um,
Protecting.
diplomacy, contact, intriguing, this
Yes, he's
all
expert.
these things. So the use of these um, political things and intrigue, counter spies, all these things in the service of Krishna,
Yeah.
or in some way is something that is there, and for sure we may have to find ourselves in situations like that. How in the use of this deceiving type of activities of diplomacy and things like that, one can maintain a very focused Krishna conscious purpose.
I'm not sure what your question is. You're mentioning that there's intrigue and there's diplomacy, and your question specifically is how are we to understand those things, or how are we to employ those things, or
Is how to employ. In one sense, sometimes in administration you have to apply this type of thing.
well, the first thing is one has to be qualified before you start employing things, and that's the problem. We're not so qualified. So our employing things, intrigue and diplomacy and deception and things like that, that's not for us. That's a simple answer. I was thinking on this topic a little differently, but similar. The the circumstance where Srila Prabhupada acted in a way that was questionable, a moralist might question the taking from the man's home the deities of Radha Landaneshwara, the way in which it happened. You know the story. You know the story? Anyone not know the story? Have you all know the story? Okay. So the man wasn't. The man had intimated that he the something. He had thought it might be nice if someday he could give these deities, and then Prabhupada took the deities right out of his home with a little nod to this assistant strong men. They picked up the deity and Radha Krishna took them from his home. No, it's not exactly theft, but it's not exactly straightforward either. So he deployed, in his case, because he had um, whatever understanding he had of what Radha Landaneshwara wanted, and it's not like he couldn't have had Radha Krishna deities by some other less, complicated means than taking from the man's home easily. Some other method. So, we don't have that adhikar. We don't have that qualification to do things. So therefore, in principle, we should be very straightforward in our dealings. On the other hand, for the mission of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada did not just look the other way, but he gave explicit sanction. I would tell you a little story, Prabhupada story. Did you ever have association with Sri Govinda? Yeah. Did you ever have association of Sri Govinda? So you know his personality. You know his personality. He was like a strict moralist personality. So in I was in Prabhupada's quarters when Sri Govinda came to visit Prabhupada, and um, there were two topics he wanted to discuss. I don't know how it was that I was there, but I was there. I can't remember. But Sri Govinda, very tall, very thin, very straightforward person, it was making a request that Prabhupada come visit Chicago, and he would arrange a big program. And Prabhupada said, "Will they pay a fee?" And Sri Govinda said, like rocked back and said, "But Prabhupada, you always said that a sadhu doesn't ask for money for speaking Krishna Katha." And in this occasion, at least, now I don't know other occasions, in this occasion, Prabhupada said, in your country, people don't appreciate something that's free. So there should be some fee. So that when they come, they'll pay attention and be appreciative of what they're paying their money for. And, he kind of swallowed and had to digest that one, Sri Govinda. And then came, a much bigger one. Sri Govinda came with a complaint about what the Sankirtan devotees in Los Angeles at that time were distributing Krishna books because they had recently been published, and they were wearing on their clothing a large apple button. Apple was the logo for the Beatles publications. So a green apple with a stem on it and a white background, and they were wearing that on their clothing, distributing Krishna books. And he thought this is misleading. People would think that they're with Apple Records when they're not with Apple Records. It was misleading. And Prabhupada's answer was very interesting. First question, in this country, is this illegal? He said, no, it's not illegal, but it's misleading. And Prabhupada explained about marketing, or, when there's business, the businessman may say, my dear friend, for you I make no profit. So in his point was, when it comes to Vaishya activities, he would be like, it's a transcendental Vaishya to distribute books, but one may say many things. For sir, for you I make no profit. When they know they can't stay in business unless they make a profit. But for you I make no profit. So in business, people may say so many things. It's okay. It's innocent. Prabhupada's words. It's innocent. Knowing that George Harrison's name being involved in the publication of this book was genuine, and that was an attractive feature. Now, where do you draw the line is another thing. It's kind of like what your question is. But in this case, there was authorization from our founder Acharya that they didn't say we're from Apple Records, but wearing an Apple button indicated something. So there's not a fine line. There's not a black and white line. On this side is white and that side is black. The principle of that which is for Krishna's service under the authority of the Acharya, then one may do. I mean, it's a similar thing was wearing Western clothes. There was also complaint, and during a period of time in the airports, devotees were wearing wigs. So, that's misleading because they're wearing a wig. So, where do you draw the line? Is your question. When can we do the things that are not as straightforward as a Brahmana is normally straightforward? So the better principle is just be straightforward and let the chips fall where they may. And then, where do you draw a line if it's not the straightforward part? Then you better have the right purpose and using Prabhupada's phrase, catch the fish without getting wet. So it's not a black and white, a bucket over here and a bucket over there kind of an answer. Better to remain in the Brahminical boundary unless one has some qualification and authorization. And that one can stretch that and be broken by that stretch. That also happened at different times in ISKCON's history. Something else?
Although the Pandavas weren't aware of the mother and her 5 sons in the house, when they set flame, they still, to some degree, it seems like they were responsible for their death. So, is there any sinful, reactions or repercussions for that, or?
This is Parochana. I didn't get it.
No, the Pandavas. When they set
Pandavas.
fire to the house, when they were leaving under the tunnel, the woman and her sons were in the house as well with Paroshana. So, do they not get sinful reactions for their death?
Burning a house?
For the death of the people in the
For
house.
the death of Parochana.
Yes.
They didn't know anything about the women in the 5. They didn't know. They didn't know. They didn't know. In Parochana, they knew. He's a murderer. They knew. He's a murderer. So your question is, was there any reaction to the Pandavas for the death of the mother and the 5 brothers? No. They didn't know. It was innocent. And for Parochana, he's a murderer. He's punished. So there's no karmic reaction for them. He was punished suitably. How's that? Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki